Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why, no one quite knows the reason. It could be that his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be perhaps that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all was that his heart was 2 sizes too small. Now whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Who's, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town. For he knew all the Who's down in Whoville beneath were busy now hanging their holly who wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer, for tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here. He growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early, and they'd rush for their toys and the noise. Oh, the noise, oh, the noise, 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 noise. That was one thing he hated. All the noise, 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 noise. And then the Who's, young and old, would sit down for a feast. And they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. They'd feast on Who pudding, rare Who roast beast. Roast beast was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. Then the Who's would do something the Grinch liked least of all. All the Who's down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together. Excuse me. With Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand and the Who's would start singing. And they'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I put up with this now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then the Grinch got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what I'll do, the Grinch laughed in his throat. I'll make a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. He chuckled and clucked, what a great Grinchy trick. With this hat and this coat, I'll look just like Saint Nick. Now all he needed is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer were scarce, they were none to be found. But did that stop the Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he grabbed his dog Max, and he grabbed some black thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, giddy up, and the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Who's lay a-snooze in their town. All their windows were dark. Quiet snow filled the air. The Who's were dreaming sweet dreams without care when the Grinch came upon the first little house on the square. This is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed as he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney. A rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or two, then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, grinned the Grinch, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room. And he took every present, pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn and plums. Then he stuffed them in bags, and the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, the Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. And then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. So he grabbed the tree and he started to shove when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou, who was no more than 2. He looked at this little Who daughter who'd gotten out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But that Grinch was so smart and so slick that he thought up a lie. And he thought it up quick. Why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here. And his fib fooled the child, and he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. The last thing he took was the log for their fire, and then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. All he left on the walls were some hooks and some wire, and the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 15:15 dawn. All the Who's still abed. All the Who's lay a snooze when he packed up his sled. He packed it up with their presents, their ribbons, their wrappings. He packed it with tinsel, their trimmings, their trappings. 5,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the Who's, he was grinchiously humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open for a moment or two, then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo. And that's a sound, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and he put a hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But this sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry. Very. The Grinch looked down at Whoville. He popped his eyes and he looked. What he saw then was a shocking surprise. All the Who's down in Whoville, the tall and the small, were singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. The Grinch stood with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, puzzling and puzzled. How could it be so? It came without presents. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. What if Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from the store? What if Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more? And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say, the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And when his small heart didn't feel quite so tight, he rode with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back their food. He brought back their presents, their food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast.